Good afternoon, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Günther Picher and I'm from Esri. We will have a workshop entitled ArcGIS, an open platform, and we will be having several speakers. We will start with my colleague Roberto Lucchi from Esri US, who will give a technology update on our product portfolio for Inspire. And then we will have 4 presentations, case studies. One, the National Geoportal from Romania. The second one will be on different Inspire implementations in Sweden. The speaker will be Lars Ahlstrin from Metria, our business partner in Sweden. Then we have a third presentation on the National Geoportal and Inspire implementations of Estonia by the Estonian Land Board. And finally, we will have a fourth presentation on the European Location Framework. This will be by Clemens Bortele from Interactive Instruments. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Roberto. Please.
Thank you, Gunther, and thank you for attending. I have a few slides. We are all here for the Inspire conference. Some of you are really expert into OGC and the Inspire specification, but I have a few slides that introduce Esri's vision for open, which includes a variety of different aspects. If you go actually to esri.com/open, you will learn more about it. So there is, when we talk about open, we hear about different keywords. Replaceability, I want to be able to replace vendor-independent modules in a bigger system. I want to be able to make it portable and translate in a different deployment environment. It has to be extensible. So those are all keywords that characterize what we mean by open, or what the community means by open. And I'll focus a little bit about interoperability, standard compliance, and open system. So there are different ways to achieve interoperability. One is, starting from the left to right, is ETL, meaning we are going to transform at a data format level what 2 different systems are able to read or write. Then we interact through standards, or we implement open systems. So I may have a CAD file or a BIM file for building, and I want to make some work in GIS. Then typically what happens is ETL are the most utilized tools for getting in the data into the system you are looking to utilize it, and back if you need. Then there are standards. Here there is not just OGC, ISO, the IHO, and so on, who contribute to the definition of specific standards or profiles that communities can utilize to interact more smoothly across systems. And then there is open. So here is a couple of quotes. Open system encourage innovation, support interoperability, promote transparency, and improve reliability. So you may have heard many times there is an API. Right? So it's not closed, there is an API. So that is from Facebook to Google, even very, very broadly, or SharePoint. Every system that is commonly used and largely utilized has a good set of interfaces that can be used to interact. So here is what basically, when Esri works on open systems, what that encompasses is open standards, and I would say, typically focus on ISO, TC211, and OGC, open data, communities, open source, open API, and data interoperability. So we try to include all these in as much as we can in the product, in the respective roadmap. There are interoperability at the data format, like geographic data. CSV file is very popular these days, which is just comma-separated values that can be loaded in a variety of different systems. But it can be also product interoperability, like I mentioned before. I'd like to work with SAP. I'd like to work with Office, Microsoft Office, data, and so on. So enabling specific product-to-product type of interoperability. And then there is open data. There is an open data portal that is part of ArcGIS Online. There is an open data policy necessary for community-based maps or community maps and so on that allows you to retain the ownership and contribute to the community. So all these are part of what Esri is doing for open data as well. And then there is open source in different way. It can be supporting open source directly. It can be using some open source library. It can be also be contributing to open source projects like Wine or others that Esri supports. There are a variety of products that are, I would say, well known. That are delivered by Esri as an open source license, the Esri GeoPortal server, which implements, for example, the Inspire Discovery Service and the metadata, is an open source product, and many others like Coop, which is a pretty widely used tool for importing data and exposing as REST interfaces. Other open source activities, 52 North is a business partner. They build open source. There is also an extension of for ArcGIS for enabling sensor observation service, and those are also part of the ecosystem. And then open standard, like I said, there are many standardization bodies that are releasing standards that we rely upon. OGC and ISO are really widely adopted. This is an ArcGIS server view for those who are not yet familiar. And then we get into the Inspire specific aspects. So ArcGIS for server releases, once you create and author your own data maps, you deliver those in a variety of different interfaces. So you see here KML or the REST API. KML is an OGC standard for those who are not aware of this. And then there are the specific Inspire profiles that are on the far end. So this is another view of what is interoperability or open system. There is a pragmatic interoperability still today in the open data portal provided in ArcGIS Online, has about 500,000 downloads, and I think 70% of those are still shapefiles. So the user requests the shapefiles as opposed to GeoJSON and other formats that are available there, even though. So that's what we mean by pragmatic interoperability. There are communities that are still having their own preference and best practice around formats.
Can I ask a question? Is there any discussion about having an API, open API for the SDE geodatabase in the same way that you've done it for the file geodatabase? Is that in the roadmap?
Not that I know of. So the file database here is an open API, which means that products like Safe FME can say you don't need a license for this. You don't need an Esri license to read and write Esri file databases because it's an open specification. It's an open API. So you can build your own software or use software that doesn't require an Esri license, for example. But I'm not aware of at the SDE side. So we are going to the ArcGIS for Inspire specific aspects. So this is an extension, is a part of ArcGIS, and is designed to help you and users with Inspire obligation to implement the immediate milestones, those who are really immediate like this year or the previous years, as well as the long-term goals. So I hope you can see it, but essentially this is the whole 34 data teams list divided by Annex 1, 2, and 3. the one in white are the ones that are currently fully supported, which means you can do data harmonization by leveraging geodatabase templates that are already available for you. So you can download the template and start populating your data or ETLing your data using these templates. For the others, it doesn't mean that you cannot do anything. There are more options for you to consider. So this is another view directly from the Inspire website. Here is the link, is the implementation roadmap. If you look at this, there are some seats here in the front if you like to get a chair. And you see again that there are deadlines that already passed, especially for Annex 1, but the biggest one are perhaps those in green, which means by 2017, Annex 1 data should be harmonized and exposed through Inspire View and Download Service, compliant, and the same applied to Annex 2 and 3 by 2020. And again, instead, there are many other deadlines here for releasing Inspire compliant view and download service, but the data can still stay in a kind of intermediate or as-is stage, right? So it's very important for you to know that there are differences and there are intermediate steps. That's why in the product we provide different options for you to implement Inspire. So those are the options. I'll start from maybe the most complex and I would say towards the final, which is the geodatabase templates path. So we provide geodatabase templates that you can use to basically put your data into it, and that would reflect the Inspire schema. It's content-wise implementing the Inspire schemas, and when you deliver those as Inspire service, the layer name, the feature types, the GML encoding, the symbology, the meaning and the semantic of everything defined in the Inspire network service is implemented out of this template. There are other options that are, and this, to be very practical, that is what helps you to meet the 2017 deadlines today. There is for Annex 1 and already for a number of Annex 2 and 3 data themes. The green milestone, the final one. And then there is an option to publish as is. There are many reasons for not being able to deliver everything or harmonize right now, and you may want to just make it available because it's a milestone, explicit milestone in the Inspire roadmap. So don't wait to have everything ready. There are intermediate milestones in the roadmap that you have to work on. And the export and publish is the third option for download, which is often called Atom-based. Atom feeds, where you have direct download to the data in the format that is made available, and you have multiple options.
So in ArcGIS for server, there is a method to publish the Atom download Atom feed.
Correct. And the open search endpoint that works as per Inspire specification. Yeah. But tools like data interoperability extension and other are very helpful to build multiple output formats, right? Again, going back to the pragmatic interoperability, we still see many users expecting to be able to download shapefiles. So if you are looking for multiple formats, you can use tools that allows you to do so, prepare those, and expose in a Inspire compliant way. So here you have a roadmap that aims at giving the best we can at the moment in terms of how we plan to implement the remaining GDB templates. So there are multiple parameters we consider. So in 10.4, which is what is available today, there is 14 out of the, sorry, shouldn't be 24 out of the 34 themes that is already available for the green milestones. And then with 10.5 at the end of the year, it will be 18 with building, species distribution, habitats, and soil being added. And then we plan to add those gradually over the years with priorities that we define based on your feedback, with priorities that are strictly dependent on the maturity of the specs or the discussions around the specs. We all hope to not just talk about compliance, I think. So we always kind of promote a vision for Inspire that is not just deliver something that has passed the GRC validator, but something that hopefully somebody is using, maybe in a phone, maybe for good analysis, for environmental or other purposes. So we always try to see that in a more blended system where there could be things that have no connection with Inspire, like other online service, and application that leverage maybe Inspire because they are OGC clients, so they can actually leverage also what Inspire makes available. So we don't want to see this as a very isolated system that is for Europe and for a specific obligation only. GeoHive in Ireland, I think, is a good example of a website and a set of functionality that provides end-user facilities for analyzing the data, printing, downloading, and making things out of authoritative data. So it's a reading OGC service, it's exposing OGC service, and so on. And you can think about that as a good way to maximize your Inspire effort. I have very few slides about the state of play, which I want to connect back to what I've been talking about. So maybe the friends from GRC here are familiar with this document, but there is a 2 pages PDF that you can download where there is for executives, so it's very brief, but it focuses on the most essential messages about midterm implementation. Where are we with this part? What is happening? Is it going well or not? So I have extracted a few sentences. You don't necessarily need to read if it is too difficult, but it basically says progress has been made. It varies by country, but progress has been made. I like to see that there's been a significant increase of number of data sets that have been advertised. They may not be compliant, they may not be fully, perfect, but they met some intermediate deadlines and it shows progress. And that enables also a mechanism where you can get feedback, because otherwise you will not get feedback from if you avoid publishing that. I think the last 3 sentences here are kind of related. It's about milestones and roadmap and funding. So it basically say the interoperability of spatial data set has not necessarily been already accomplished. Why? Because the deadlines are actually in the future. Okay? So you may already work with it using ArcGIS for Inspire, but if you cannot, you can still accomplish some good intermediate deadlines. So 2017, 2020. And there are, about this data harmonization process, the statement that is being made here is there are indications that some implementation effort which are not due until 2020 may be costly and difficult. Okay, so just an early warning for those who have not yet harmonized the data, it's classified as the most challenging task in Inspire. So that's why we implemented the GDB templates. So the GDB template is something that all of you can use and actually share knowledge, right? So that's very important if you aim at building some QA on the data, on that template. Again, you can share with others because it's the same, it's a common GDB template. And it's already ready to use. So you don't need to look at technical guidance or GML straight to implement this. You can rely on the GDB template. And that's very important in my view because the content likely will not change that frequently over time. But the encoding will. Okay, so if GML version or the application schema version has changed, the GDB template decouples that factor from the content. So if possible, we don't ask you to re-implement it. So there has been a transition between version 3 and version 4 of the schemas. About a year ago it was announced, and we released a new version of the software, and that version allows you to decide if you want to switch to the new schema, but the template is not changed. So if you already made an effort to understand the model, understand what that code list means for you in your country and so on, that effort stays and you don't have to rework on it. And then we switch to the Inspire user stories. As Gunther mentioned, we'll start with the case from Romania. Lucian is here. Yeah, please, Lucian, join me here. Lucian Zavate from Romania. I'll help you to find the slides. Okay.
Thank you, Roberto. I'm going to be brief. I'm going to discuss the user stories that have we already implemented in Romania. There are two major implementations. One is, I think I have a temporization in here. So one is at NECPI, and the other one is at the Ministry of Defense. Just bear with me 1 second. Did you change something? I think I have some animation, some transition time.
Transition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just make sure.
Select all of them.
Yeah, on mouse click. Strange. Thank you. Sorry about that. So, what Roberto has already discussed, we kind of took the long way. We already, for NCPI, we already did the data harmonization for five data themes. And this was pretty challenging, I have to say. We had to use lots of ETL tools and lots of processes to understand their initial data and to make sure we are able to do a sound transformation from their production system into an Inspire database. So, as I told you, there are two main implementations. One, there's a multi-tenant Inspire portal that is being supported by NECPI. This also supports, I'm sorry. This also supports the entire INIS Council. I'm supposed to know this stuff, right? So this one is okay, this one is not okay. Something happened. Let me just make sure. So I'm supposed to speak 5 seconds for each slide. This is something that you did, Roberto?
I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, no, it's okay. I will just, maybe, I think it's something from my presentation, so I'm just making sure.
Maybe just hold your finger here.
No. I will untick all of these things here, and it should be okay. Yeah. Do you think it has something to do with that? There was a timer on the... So I was thinking Roberto tried to subtly tell me. So in Romania we have a council which is called the NIS Council. It was founded in 2010. NECPI is leading this council, and as already Roberto told you, these types of implementation are kind of rough, so they decided to make it easier for the other members, and they implemented this multi-tenant geoportal which allows the other members of the NIS Council, which are responsible for various data themes, to actually document and put the metadata in this geoportal. At the beginning, they intended to actually host the services themselves, but they found it to be rather difficult and nothing, and they decided not to do it in the end. So this is the architecture. As you can see, hopefully, as you can see, we split it all of the services on clusters. This is a conceptual schema. Actually, right now we have more nodes in there, but we decided to have a cluster for viewing services, a cluster for download services, a cluster for transformation services, and so on. And we also try to make sure that the entire architecture is also reliant. So we have implemented those things in it slips me right now. It's HA. High availability, thank you. So one of the...
High availability is one of the non-functional requirements in this part. So it's not something that is a plus, it's a must.
It's a must. So we implemented that. And we also use that for supplementing capacity, so we also respond to another requirement, which is the quality of service and display time and so on. So in the first step, we tackled after implementing the GeoPortal, we then tackled the data themes. NECPI is responsible for 8 data themes, so in one of the projects that we implemented with them, we began harmonizing 5 of those. We were pretty lucky because NECPI already was maintaining a product which is called Topro 5. It's basically topographic map of Romania 1 to 5,000. And when they began working on that product, they kind of foresee that it's going to be used in Inspire, so the data schemas are not identical, but pretty close. So we were lucky there. And also we had the cadastral parcels. Here we are not lucky because we are using a developed system which is called Etera. It's also based on S3 software, an S3 platform, but it was implemented before. But still we managed to also create an ETL for that one also. You have to understand that the cadastral parcel team was the most challenging because the data dynamics, the way the data actually changes every day, and we had to make sure that we are able to synchronize the Inspire database with the production database daily. So that was the most challenging part, but we succeeded it. So as I told you, we created ETLs for administrative units, cadastral parcels, geographical names, hydrography, and transportation network. You will see later that geographical names was initially handled by NECPI, but right now the Ministry of Defense is responsible for that theme, and we are doing it. We had to make sure that all the ETLs were usable because, as you know, data changes. So for the topographic map, we have to run these tools once every 6 months. But for the cadastral parcel, we have to do it daily and make sure that they also do provide the data in time. So currently, the Romanian Inspire GeoPortal includes, as I told you, administrative unit, cadastral parcels, geographical names, hydrography network, and also transportation network. There is another theme which came from another project at the Ministry of Environment, the protected sites. And basically, we had a few challenges. If I would sum to 3 bullets, data changes takes place in production environment. We have to make sure that the Inspire geodatabase is being synchronized with the production database. We have to make sure that we have an object lifecycle management. This is by far the most difficult part. I mean, for cadastral parcels, it was quite simple because they had a unique identifier for each cadastral parcel, and this is also being handled in the legislative process now when property is sold or stuff like that. So they already had some notions of object lifecycle management, but for the other teams, we are still having problems, actually. So in terms of how do we synchronize these products, as I told you, Topro 1 to 5,000 is being synchronized twice a year. And there's a medium rate in data change for administrative units. This is being synchronized monthly, as there are all sorts of conflicts for boundaries between administrative units. They are being solved in court of law, actually. And when a new boundary is being established, we have to make sure it is available on the GeoPortal. So we also have a synchronization mechanism here. All of the topography map, we have helped them to make it available as a base map. We are using the S3 World Topographic Base Map template. You can also see it on the GeoPortal. And the recacheing is done once the update is being done, and we try to recache only the updated areas. For the cadastral parcels, there's a high rate in change. There's a high rate in data change. as I told you, daily changes. We actually synchronize it every night to do a delta on the databases. We have some monitoring on these processes, but right now we are moving from the current production system to another one. So we are actually taking data from two places right now, which is strange. And the data is served dynamically because we do not have time to cache it. So we are optimizing this with some scale references. Another Inspire initiative in Romania was the one that the Ministry of Defense implemented. We have a dedicated Inspire geoportal only for the Ministry of Defense. Right now, we only have the public-facing one. We intend to do a private one for their internal use. It's already federated with the National Geoportal, and of course, it relies on the ArcGIS platform. So we have their ArcGIS server, image server extensions, portal for ArcGIS, S3 geoportal server, ArcGIS for Inspire, and we are using a lot of data interoperability. In a nutshell, this is their implementation architecture. Actually, it's the one that they allowed me to show. But the public part is actually served in this configuration. We have this type of implementation there. They are providing, because they are responsible for 3 Inspire data themes. It's ortho imagery, digital elevation model, and geographical names. For digital elevation model and ortho imagery, we had to do the implementation on our own. Let's say I'm pretty satisfied with what we already have in there, but it's not something that we can, for example, use, something like the geodatabase model that ArcGIS for Inspire leverages. It's something that we built with them, and it was a bit harsh. We also do provide non-Inspire data sets. It's data like scan topographic maps and VMAP data. These are made available as base maps in the geoportal themselves, and also available for the entire Inspire community in Romania. And just one more thing I want to share. So in the beginning, they actually, both NECPI and Ministry of Defense, they said, okay, this is like a check that we have to do. I hope they will not get mad at me for saying that. But then they discovered it is much useful because they had all sorts of requests from different data consumers, both private and government, and it was kind of easy for them to just pinpoint them to the Inspire services and make them, you can use this one or you can use this one. And so even though at the beginning they saw it as something that we have to do, now it's quite indispensable for them, and they are considering in adding more functionality to it. So that's about it in a few words. Not 5 seconds per slide, but...
Can I ask one question?
So I forgot, should I say at the beginning? The idea was to collect the questions for Lucy and others for the end, but if it is a quick one, go ahead.
It's okay.
I'd like to call Lars now. Okay.
Hello, everyone. First, thank you for having me, Gunther and Roberto. My name is Lars Alstrin. I'm from Sweden. I work at a company called Metria. And today we're going to talk about how I work with different agencies in implementing Inspire in Sweden. So let's see if I can get this show on the road. Yeah, excellent, it works. So first, a little bit about me. I have been at Metria since 2011, and that is when I was first introduced to Inspire, so it was right in. And at the start, I was mostly focusing on the network services. And now, Roberto, you can correct me, but I think that was ArcGIS for Inspire 1.0, which was the first release back then. And I don't remember if GeoServer Inspire extension was available that early, might have been a bit later. But that was my main focus, and later on I started working with more phases of the Inspire implementation, but that was my main introduction to Inspire. So a little bit about Metria. We formed when I joined, basically, obviously. But previously, before that, we were a division of Lantmäteriet, which is the National Land Survey of Sweden. And describing ourselves, we like to say that we are the link between the map and reality. Yeah, easy as that. A little bit more what we do. Planning and measurement services. We have a lot of people out in the field working with their sticks and prisms and whatever they got. We have GIS consultants, GIS as a service. I think that is where I fit in. And we also have a lot of IT products with a map and geodata focus. So we represent in 23 cities in Sweden, from Kiruna, which, if you are familiar to Swedish geography, it's way up in the north, and Malmö is way down in the south. And this is obviously a heritage from being a part of the land survey, because they're also way covered in Sweden. We are 260 people. Together with me in Umeå, we have 13. We are 14, but I have 13 colleagues. And they are mainly working with app development for the forest industry, for example. So I am alone in this work. We have more than about 3,000 clients. They are big and small. They are bigger and small projects and different types of assignments. So enough about that. Let's focus on what I'm here to really talk about. So what I'm going to do today is trying to talk a little bit how I work with implementing Inspire together with some of our customers, and these are agencies in Sweden. I have written from start to finish. I mean, that's a little bit tricky because obviously finish isn't really the end of it. I mean, it goes on. But for this part, I have called it the A to B point. And these are some of the agencies that I have been working with. They aren't really sorted in a special filter, but if you look at the first one, the Swedish EPA, they are what I would call a geodata-heavy agency. They have been working with geodata for a long time. They have data sets that's corresponding to Annex 1, 2, and 3, which obviously make them, by now, very Inspire familiar. Moving a little bit down the list, for example, we have the Health and Social Care Inspectorate. They are very new to Inspire. They have one data set corresponding to Annex 3. So it's a little bit different here, where they come from and what they have been doing before. So where do I start? And as I mentioned before, there are different clients and obviously they have different needs. How familiar is the client with Inspire? Well, that depends on the geodata heavy. I mean, the Swedish EPA are right now, they are very familiar with Inspire because they've been working for it with a lot of years. Hence, the type of work I do with them differs a lot from those agencies who haven't been working with Inspire at all. So that's where that's a little bit different. And that works with how familiar they are with geodata. Some agencies aren't working with geodata at all until now, obviously. And as I said, some have been doing it for a long, long time. And then the point, what are the goals? Full implementation or minimum fulfillment? I mean, that's a tricky point, I know. Full implementation, is that even possible? You can have discussions about that. It's a different discussion. Minimum fulfillment is obviously what some agents are looking for. I mean, it costs time and money doing this. And I mean, it's how it is for agencies. You can't change that, even though this is the land of the law, the Inspire directive. So you have different ways of looking at it. Yeah, so this presentation, moving on, will focus more on the first-time clients, as I like to call them, and that in regards to Inspire is Annex 3 teams. So I won't really talk so much about the Swedish EPA, for example. So I have developed my own little roadmap, you can say. I have 4 basic blocks where I like to indulge in a little bit. These are not set in stone. They change a little bit depending on how Inspire or geodata, how the knowledge of Inspire and geodata is. But this is where I like to start, and yeah, so obviously start to finish. And it's working quite well. I have been, I've been working on it after every time I've used it. So right now I think it's pretty perfect. So the first block is something I would like to call basics. And the first block, what is Inspire? Obviously, the agency is aware of Inspire because that's why I'm there. So it's not like I go over a directive and we have a 1-hour presentation of what Inspire is. It's more about what does Inspire mean for you and what are your requirements fulfilled to implement it. And then we have obviously data specifications because this is together with obviously the specification for the network services, but starting with the data specification for the teams, these are their obviously document that they need to follow and need to know. So that's one thing. And what level of service do you need? That has been mostly the same. They need a lot of service. They need help with the network services, the metadata, the harmonization, and etc. But it's good to discuss that anyway, because I mean, if they would like to host the services themselves, I can help them with that. That's a different type. So it's good to discuss it so they know their options. They shouldn't be hijacked into something that they could maybe solve themselves. And with examples, I mean, I always try to have examples when talking about different aspects of Inspire. If it's metadata, well then let's look at some metadata. It can be at the National Geodata portal, at the Inspire data portal. Talking services, well let's look at some services. So it's always good to have examples so they can see more something you can touch, not just like read about or talk about. So I think that's a good way, and I think it's appreciated to that you can see a little more concrete what everything means. And the next block is data specifications and the data set. The common feedback from the data specification is not the easiest read, hard to digest, or a variation of that. And it's fine, it's okay. I mean, it's a formal document, it's following the ISO rules, so it makes sense that it's kind of hard, and it's new also. So therefore, it's good to take some time going over the chapters. Obviously, we reiterate and go through them again, but just go through all the chapters at once. The overview, the data content, the metadata, data quality, and the delivery and portrayal, for example. And also, I've written this is a kind of a help me, help you situation. I'm not a domain expert in any of the fields covering in the Inspire teams, but they obviously are. So that makes it more easy for me to explain the data content and the structure part. So it's easy for them to take it in and understanding what those parts mean. And talking about the overview, obviously, they should somehow recognize what is the text there. I mean, if you take a natural risk zone team, for example, someone who is working with that should obviously recognize some of the text in there, how you calculate risk, for example. It shouldn't be total news for them. It is for me, though. So moving on to looking at the data content and the structure, that's very well. It works well. We can feed off each other there. So, and I think the result is actually better. We can have that type of, they can feel that they can help me while I'm helping them. Yeah. So the second part of that block is the data set. Obviously, they do need some kind of data set so we can move on. And the first one, is it available? In many times it is, sometimes it's not. So then obviously we have to geocode it first. And an SDI in place, I mean, a complete SDI following all the rules you have to do that is maybe not as common, but some type of infrastructure I'm looking for. It can be just a geodatabase or a more described geodatabase or with metadata and so on. And then the next phase is obviously how does this data set match to the corresponding data specifications structure. What is missing, if anything. I mean, this is never that painstakingly real because, I mean, we all know that a lot of attributes are voidable, and there are those who are if available. So this has been working so far quite well. We never really gotten stuck on something that they need to complement with, so that's been working really well. The last point, obviously, the schema mapping and harmonization. So, trying to explain why and how and for who we're doing this, it's quite tricky. I mean, the why is obviously, I mean, you have to do it. And the how, then I can show how I do it. I use FME, for example. Extremely competent doing these types of tasks. But there are other ways, of course. But so I just show them that this is how I do it. If you have FME available at your agency, fine, then it's excellent, then you can do it yourself, or we can help you with it. But it's nice to show them anyway, so that I just don't say, yeah, I can do it for you. I show them how I do it, and yeah. So they get a feel for it, going from the national data to the Inspire data, so they can see what is happening. So yeah. The next part, following the chapters of the data specification, is metadata. And in Sweden, there's the national geodata portal, geodata.se, is where all the Inspire metadata is presented and uploaded to. So that's a good point just to start showing them that, search for a couple of data sets and just show them how it works and how the metadata posts are described. Together with this, previously there was a downloadable metadata editor. This has been changed now, so you just log into the portal. Each agency gets a user, so you log into the portal and you, via a web interface, create the metadata. I think this is a great improvement. I think most agencies will agree with me, so that's actually really great. It's easier to maintain, not having to deal with a third-party client. It's easy to do it, and it's very easy to validate the metadata right away. So that's a big plus. Still, having said that, as easy as it may be, they still often want me to do it for them. So yeah.
So who maintains that application, the metadata editor?
That's the Swedish Land Survey. Yeah. So next point, actually, obviously, it's going forward. What type of metadata is required? You need metadata for the data set and the services, and you need on a service level, on a discovery level, contact information, quality data, update links, anything. The most tricky one is the contact one. They say, all right, who is going to get all the mails regarding this? Let's find someone who isn't at the meeting. Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea. So that's the most tricky one. Quality data update is also a little bit more tricky because if you just geocoded your data, you haven't really had much time thinking about that. So data quality, very important. The second point here, yeah, it speaks volumes for me. It doesn't make it less important though. And I try to go through the chapter and trying to explain the quality elements and trying to make examples of what they mean. It's somewhat tricky to understand, but maybe because of me, but I try my best. But since there are really no requirements here talking about the minimum fulfillment, so yeah, this is probably the chapter that gets the least day. Obviously, we make quality ensurements before we host any data, of course. Talking about easy stuff as geometrical and that type of validation, but we also make sure that we don't publish any data that is obviously missing anything. So doesn't mean any lesser quality. And then the last part is obviously the network services. There are types of services. You have the view service and the download services. And these also have their special types of requirements. So what alternatives are there? I present the alternatives that I know of. We have here ArcGIS, GeoServer, Map Server. There are many more. I tried not to leave any out, so they get a feel for what they can use. So at Metria we are hosting ArcGIS service and GeoServer. So if they want us to host the services, it's either one of those. But I really implore them to explore the choices they have before making any decisions. But still, 100% of the time they want us to host the services, which makes sense, obviously. setting up an infrastructure for hosting Inspire services, if you don't have any of that before, it's quite costly and takes time. So yeah. And being a service provider, obviously they are quite interested on how we maintain the Inspire requirements coming to the services. We're talking about availability, performance, continuity of services, for example. So this is a very coarse picture. I'm not a technician really, so this works well for me and for them. But just to get a feel for how we have set it up in Metria. And this is obviously not just for Inspire services. This is for all types of services and our geodata. This is how we have set it up. And we have a little bit of numbers here if you are interested in that. And it's good too, so they get a feel for, because I mean, they want their services to be available, for example, the performance to be good. So it's important to show them this. And moving a little bit closer, this is actually our ArcGIS for Inspire setup. We have 2 servers, obviously in each of the data centers. They are virtual servers, they are obviously images of each other. And then we have a proxy and a load balancer. So yeah, just sorting out so not one server gets all the requests, it spreads them out. We feel that this is working very well. We have changed to virtual server because we felt that we didn't really need the performance. It works very well as this. So that's one improvement we made. I don't know why the arrow from the test server goes directly to the internet. It's obviously behind the proxy too. So, and this is basically the end of the workshop now. I have gone through everything with the agency. They know what we need to do, what they need to do, what do they want me to do. And the service is obviously the last part. So this is together with the metadata, the product of the implementation. Yeah. Do I have any time left? Yeah, I can go on. Yeah. So lastly, I would like to show you a use case that is regarding Annex 1 data and the Swedish EPA's data. It's a web feature service, Inspire download. We're using ArcGIS for Inspire. I would just like to show you this because I think it's actually I think it's a great service. I think it's a great offering, what you get. So quite quickly we're going to go through how we have set this up and how the progress works and the result of it. So the setup here, we have we need source data, obviously. It's the national data from the Swedish EPA protected sites. We have the target, which is obviously a Spire database, which is loaded with the ArcGIS for Inspire schema. Doing all the ETL work, we use FME. And obviously the authoring and the publishing tool is ArcGIS server with the Inspire extension installed, currently version 10.4. So it's not more technical than this is. I think that's enough. So this is the process. We have 3 different steps. Obviously, the first part is to do the schema mapping to the protected sites data structure. We do this in Excel, creating mapping tables that we use in FME later. There's a big advantage here, obviously, because if anything changes, for example, in the source data, we just edit the Excel file, and the same if we need to map it to a different Inspire attribute, well, then we change it in the Excel file. So maintaining this is quite simple, I would say, just editing the Excel tables. So yeah, so that's one of the easy parts. Then we come to the middle part, which is the transforming part. This is obviously what takes time because we have to create something that does this, and we are doing it with scripts in FME. The script is doing a number of things. For example, at the input level, we have the national database, but we also have the Inspire database. And that is so when we have done the initial load, the second time we run it, we get the objects from the Inspire database so we can compare to the national database if any objects have changed. So we can set the lifespan and version ID attributes. It takes some time to get this up and running, but when you do, it's very easy to maintain, as I said. If there are any changes, most of them can be sorted out in the Excel tables. Otherwise, if you got the main script there, it's very easy to maintain. let's just leave it at that. And then the last step, offer the map and publish the service. Again, this is also a very easy step. It's very self-explanatory. I use ArcMap to alter the maps via the Inspire toolbox. I point out the Inspire database, select the layers I want, save the MXD, publish the MXD, add the metadata I want, and then do some, if I want to restrict direct access, for example, add some stored queries, for example, I do that, and then just publish. Yeah. So the advantages of this, I think it's very easy to maintain, as I mentioned. The hard part is getting the transformation routine set up, but when you get it set up, yeah, it's working very well. The easy to alter maps, select which layers you want from the Inspire tool, takes seconds. Very easy to publish it, and also later versions, I think the administration has gotten a lot better. I think it's extremely easy now to add your queries, stop the direct access, for example. I think that's very usable, especially the stop direct access. I think that's, I think that's very, very good that you can do that. And also you get an Inspire feature download service, WFS 2.0. That has to account for something. To me it does anyway. And at the moment I would say that this process is the least amount of time you have to put in. Obviously you need some software to do it, I'm aware of that. But I have tried to do the same using GeoServer, for example, and then I use the app scheme extension. It's a little bit tricky, to be nice. It takes a lot of time. Basically, it takes a lot of time, and maybe I'm not technical enough, but I think that could use some work if it's going to be applicable to this. I do know that Hail and GeoSolutions solutions are working together to make use of what you do in Hail to make use of the app schema extension, and that is very good. So let's see how that pans out. But at the moment, I favor this solution. Some of the disadvantages: previous versions a bit unstable. I would say if you are getting into this right now, you're getting a great value, because I think it's very stable, and there are a lot of options that weren't there before. So getting in right now is a very good time to do it. Obviously, there are some steps required to get to the goal. Mainly that's the wrong button. Mainly the middle part here. That's what's time's taking. And obviously that requires, in our case, special types of software. So that's obviously a hurdle. But I think it's well worth the work when you get the result. And a more general determinant is who can use it, who actually uses it. And for agencies, it's quite an important and interesting note to do, or to discuss. Just consuming WFS 2.0, there aren't that many clients that can read, especially if you have a complex feature. And then, who uses it? I can show agencies a lot of examples where I've done myself mashups, taking in different Inspire services from different countries and trying to make some useful output. But that's me, and that's not really real. So real use cases from, it's needed. It's really needed, I think. And that's, I think let's leave it at that. And we were supposed to look at a result here just to show something, but I think the internet is down. And the offline version of this is in a presentation that I haven't sent in to Roberto, so that's my fault. But, yeah. Look at this.
The internet, even with the network cable, is not working right now, but that would result in the site CNL.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mars.
Can I ask a very quick question?
Yes.
Why do you stop direct access?
Well, I would open it up if the users were a little bit more aware of how to. I think the typical request to the VFS is get everything. And if you have like
It actually came
60,000, 100,000 objects, I mean, that takes some time, obviously, because you have to generate the GML.
But the system, you put a limit
Yeah,
on the number of records returned.
yes, yes.
I just wonder why you tend to stop direct access, because that's, at the end of the day, that's the direction I think Inspire will go.
Yes, I know. It probably will change. It will change. But as for now, I would try to recommend using store queries to get out your objects. And if they would say, well, you need to open it up, of course, that's what I will do. So it's probably nothing more serious than that. But it's quite painstaking, and then you get the feedback that, well, the service doesn't seem to work. I have been waiting here for a long time, but they're still downloading the GML file. So especially the Swedish API, they have a lot of complex polygons of some lakes and whatever, which have so many vertices. So yeah.
Thank you, Lars.
Thank you.
And again, question later. Oh, still showing that? There is something wrong here. Thank you, Lars, again. Sulev Oistpu is not here, has not yet arrived here in Barcelona, so I will present his slides. And this is about the Inspire implementation in Estonia, the ArcGIS, and I'm sure Sulev would do a better job, but I will do my best here. Probably where I'm lacking of background information is about Estonia, so this slide will give you some background. I've learned quite a bit from reading, but I've never been in Estonia. I wish I was. But I will focus on the slides that are a little bit more technical and or organizational type of detail, which I think are very important for you to know about Estonia. And again, Sulev will be here tomorrow, the whole week. So if you see his badge, stop him and have the question you would have wanted to ask today. If I can, I will respond later, but otherwise. So this is at the national level in Estonia, the implementation is pretty much centralized. So you are probably used to read this diagram from the bottom top, expecting the service on the top. This diagram is the other way around, but the essence is not changed. You see here that there is a layer here, which is where all the data harmonization takes place, or the data updates are taking place. And what feeds that is the Estonian land board data sets, so their direct access to the database, which is the authoritative data, and they harmonize it. Or in some cases, like for the environmental register or the maritime, there are other ArcGIS for Inspire nodes that are serving specific data teams. Okay? So this is a process where the spikes are different distributed nodes in the network. They all go through until they get exposed consistently in the Estonian geoportal and through that in the EU geoportal. So this is important to understand. Is a kind of hybrid model where everything is centralized, but the source is coming in as data that needs to be harmonized, or web service, Inspire service that are ready to be registered in the portal. So those models both apply. So there are, besides, there are details like also what database is being used here. So Postgres, degree for this specific team, and then Conterra solutions for controlling access to the data, especially for those who are not released under an open data license. So it's important. I like this slide because it gives you also a sense of the implication of not having a license that allows you to share publicly. And then, as I said, there is an Estonian geoportal that provides access to WMS, WFS, and the specific atom feeds for the Inspire network. And then for the future, you see here a couple of additional boxes. One is the ELF extension for the ELF specific data themes, for those who are familiar with it, the European Location Framework, which is which relies on Inspire data specs to build a a set of profiles, and then a building register. Also, again, if that data is not available for transformation, it would be registered as a live service. Implementation. So you see here the status in green. What you see in green is basically what is available for with an open data license for free. So if you go in the portal, you will be able to discover but also access it. Okay? If it is not with a green background, it means that it's been published but not entirely available. So you see here that there are different publication options. WFS or Atom, that depends on the data teams or the specific decisions that the data provider has made in Estonia. But this gives you an outline of, for Annex 1, for example, of what is already out there. As you see here on the top, already delivered using the version 4 schemas. Again, from an ArcGIS for Inspire perspective, it's just you run a software update. So that's what it means to be able to change the GML encoding and the other implications when you serve your data. And then for other themes here again, there is a missing geophysics, as you see here in red. So it's an area where we are working. So the GDB templates, when we deliver geology application schema, we didn't include it because it includes observation and measurements. And as you may have heard this morning, there is work in progress. Okay? So as again, we keep into account the priority that the users give us, but also the feasibility. Data themes also in Annex 3 that have been delivered, and as you can see here, Atom is also used because it's an easy way to deliver. So here is a kind of priority, like we take from other users from Estonian land boards. So those are the themes that they see for them are important. So it's a good list. And this is the feedback that we seek over this week. Please stop by the booth. We are over there. And if you have a specific theme or issue, we would be happy to hear from you. The Estonian GeoPortal is what makes available these data sets for discovery, view, and download. It has clients for WMS and discovery, and here is a illustration from a graphical point of view. So when you submit a search, you get a preview, but you also get the details on the metadata. Sulev also ran some months ago a survey. Just jump into this slide. The survey was essentially asking if you could enter information regarding this question: what institution, and that again was his way to help us further to find out what are the problematic area, what are the data teams that generally are considered very important to implement first. We don't have bugs. I don't know why it's written bugs now. I'm joking. Everybody has bugs, but we work really hard to make it better every time. 11 countries, in addition to plus Estonia, responded to the survey. You see here a little bit of overview that Sulev, the way Sulev interpreted the result of the survey. The way we see it is this view should be, or the view of the survey should be complemented by many other factors. The fact that countries, specific member states are implementing SPAR in a regional way, that implementation is not that visible. It's not exposed as it is when there is a very strong central coordination in the country. Here again, the view emerging from the survey, what are the data themes that are required, elevation, geology, the missing packages, buildings, soil, utility, and so on. As he said, he wrote, oh, I'm surprised, nobody requested statistics, but we got requests for statistics through other channels. So again, every time you feel like you have an important statement to make about priorities, If you look at the report about 1.5 years ago from ISPAR, the most requested data team from 60% of the consumer is land use. It's the most desired data team, okay? So land use, nobody asked. We thought it was worth to do it for the consumers. So land use is supported because of that reason.
So just to unclear what you're saying, it's the consumers that requested land use, not the providers?
Yes. Software problems, I don't know why we have this slide, but I'm joking, but full transparency. So I spoke with Sulev, so ask him also. Some of these problems are things that are not necessarily bug. They could be older version, or it could be I didn't know, okay? So it's very important that we start sharing these things even more openly, okay? So that's why I'm happy to go through this slide. Performance issue, so on specific data teams or in general. We have best practice on ArcGIS on how to deploy, how to monitor the system, how to increase the number of parallels instances, like Lucian said, high availability, fault tolerance, and so on. All these things are there. Maybe it wasn't clear, maybe we didn't convey enough that that's expected in ISPAR. Okay, so it's a so-called non-functional requirement, but it's expected, and we have ArcGIS provides good best practice and tool to do that, and we are going to work a little bit more to make it more obvious, to make it more visible. S3 WMS WFS compliance to OGC and ISPAR standards. S3 this year has passed 16 OGC certification, is the highest number. We are doing our best to do everything we can. And when it passed to compliance on ISPAR, I think we all know here, I'm not aware of an official ISPAR validator, but we think we all recognize the JRC1 as a good reference, and we do our best. We think we are down to one warning, and we just need to figure out what that warning really means for us. But we are really doing our best, and again, it's an evolving process. Lars mentioned what is finished here in ISPAR is not really an end, but is a beginning of another kind of life cycle. Problems with metadata does not fully. Yes, again, it's all about validation. So we did improve every release. The JRC validator changes frequently. Sometimes we pass the validation, the week later we don't. And we are doing our best, they are doing their best. As the understanding of what a specific requirement means gets refined, things change. So that's why in maintenance we give you the updates and fixes for these things. In my view, are not really fixes, are improvements, because not even the validator the week before was aware of that potential problem, right? So it's evolving the validator, and so does the software that has to work with that validator. Problems with symbology. Yes, so we provide a way to include symbology that could be your own, which means you can make your national symbology in an ISPAR view service, but automatically deliver the ISPAR symbology, which means the view service will have always two ways of rendering your maps. The one that is according to ISPAR and the one that you define it. And there was some ambiguity on this process. And again, we are improving. Our web help is online, is in 4 languages, and we are improving, adding all these details as we go there. You can, where it is, the proprietary coding rules. This means essentially the ISPAR is an abstract specification. When it says it's a feature, it could be a point, a polygon, it could be, sometimes there is the data model and then a note on the side that says, oh, please don't do the other thing. That would be allowed anyway, right? So all these things require a little bit of ad hoc work, and it's an implementation, it's a physical implementation of that UML, which is in the template. So sometimes you can see that as a proprietary. In my view, it's not. It's just a physical implementation of an abstract spec. But we can debate probably on this forever. This is another best practice. The Postgres they were using, when you install it, for those who do it, by default, it doesn't have the UTF encoding, and therefore, when you put data in there that is having special character, is not going to work. So it's not really in the software that we built, but it was a data source problem. Again, it's really a matter of exchanging this as a best experience. Lack of documentation, every version we increase it. We change it the way we document the templates. For example, I invite you to have a look at the latest one if you haven't, because we understand that everybody is working first on the matching tables. So the best way we found that's reflecting the best way we found to make you understand very quickly what's the corresponding field or table name in the physical implementation as opposed to the conceptual one. So we do our best for that. If you have feedback, we constantly seek those, and we'll try to improve further.
I think you deserve congratulations for not skipping that slide.
I should have, but no, I'm joking.
If it was me, I would have skipped it.
No, this is really the only opportunity during the year, the Inspire conference, to exchange something here. So please even stop and raise your hand now, later, or during the week. Again, we are really doing our best to do that. In the slide that you will find the website, there is that link which will lead you to the Excel file with the survey. Actually, I believe it's a Google survey, and you will be able to, if you want, to enter information there. There is.
Just feeding back that, as you probably know, there is a piece of work happening to try and create automated, test suites for metadata and WFS, WMS, etc. So I think that's coming. This is going to be something I'll do a week.
Okay. See, surprise. I forgot the last slide. So Sulev says, again, this is Sulev's thoughts, is a good solution for central database, a comprehensive and effective Inspire data model managed through a user interface. We do our best to translate as much as we can. So the 21 official languages, everything you enter in the metadata that is having a lookup code list is automatically translated for you. Easy to publish, lack of information on development plans. Again, we do our best. The slide with the timeline is our response, for example, to that. Slow addition of data model, that's all relative. We saw that there is a tendency from data provider to postpone as much as they can, and we already have halfway through available. So we think we are pretty much actually in shape on that roadmap. So last presentation is from Clemens Portel. On ELF.
All right. Okay. So yeah, it's my job to finish this slot, and I will be talking about the European Location Framework, which was actually, it appeared already on one of the Estonian slides in terms of the extensions, and I will be mostly talking about a specific aspect of what we're doing with ArcGIS in the context of the European Location Framework implementation. First, for those who haven't heard about ELF before, I will have a few general slides that cover mainly the project, and then I'll go into the specific details. So it's really, the starting point is we have all these national data sets from national mapping agencies that are the big drivers of the European Location Framework, but it all needs to fit together in a regional or even global context. And of course, in the regional context, it's Inspire in Europe. For the European mapping agencies, Inspire is the key thing that puts the framework for things that are made available on a European basis. So the European ELF, or European Location Framework, is kind of an answer to this requirement to bring the different mapping and cadastral authority data sets in a consistent way. So what it is, it's a project, a rather long project, 44 months, and it actually stops end of next month. So most of the time is done. And currently there has been some extensions. Currently there are 23 NMCAs, the mapping agencies, and in total 40 partners, including us, including also Esri, including One Spatial, Conterra, many others as well. And really what the goal is, as I said, it's when it's fully developed, the idea is to take all the national data sets and make sure that they fit together well, both spatially from the data point of view and also from the licensing point of view, etc. So that you really have a single point of access where you can get consistent European reference data. Of course, with the idea to increase the reuse of that data both by the public sector but also the private sector. So that's basically the value proposition that it actually does. It should make it simpler for private and public sectors, and also they mentioned startups here, which also really says it should be straightforward and easy. You don't have to be a big organization to actually do something useful with it, but it should be easy to use that straight away. And together with other data. So there will be several presentations and workshops and this week that provide more detail about the whole activity of these 40 partners. And I'll focus on a specific aspect that we've been dealing with as Interactive Instruments and Esri business partner and how we use the ArcGIS platform in the context of the European Location Framework. And the starting point is, I think we've heard that also before, is Inspire is very specific on what you have to do as a provider, and we have technical guidance, implementing rules, but initially it was very restricted on what it said nothing about the using side. There's been a lot of activity in recent years, but there is still limited guidance and tool support. We've heard that about the question, how do I access the data, etc. So that's really the Inspire, the regulation part, looks only as part of the data flow. And when the project was designed, which is now, I don't know, probably 5 years ago, we said, let's try one thing, is we create the concept of affiliated platforms. So basically what ELF is implementing in the national, in the member states is basically Inspire nodes. But we said it's okay, we want to make it easier to bring the data to other platforms which people are already using. So it's natural, it feels natural for them to use the Inspire data. They have no technical issues. It's easy for them to continue to do that. So have data, ELF data, and basically Inspire data that is ready for immediate use, both by GIS users and application developers. So the tools and APIs that they're using, they should continue to use that. And of course, what we saw there at the point is it's important that it's web-based. Typically, that also means then cloud-based support, but it's web-based, and so that you fit with the current technological trends and that we see is how people are using devices, applications to actually solve things. So support for devices, including smartphones, etc., is important. In the project, we used ArcGIS as an example for that concept of an affiliated platform, but in principle, there could be, you could also do that with Mapbox or whatever other platform or linked data cloud, or that the concept translates to other things. And it really resonates. One of the things that we've also been following since I mentioned the web aspect, from an architectural point of view, what we've been looking at is what are practices that are happening in the World Wide Web. So there are activities in W3C. There's a general, currently a candidate recommendation, which is relatively fresh, and that has a number of best practices. If you publish data on the web, that's something that that's considered good practice or best practice, and one is exactly following in that direction. So publish data in multiple formats so you can reach more users, because different users or different use cases will want to use different formats or also different service interfaces, etc. There is also another activity that's on spatial data on the web best practices, and we're also looking into that and trying to see how well that works together. So what does ELF provide? So there is, of course, a key thing is the data that is provided for quite a number of Inspire data themes. And in addition, so that's then master level data, and in addition also the regional and global data, which you can already currently get from Eurogeographics, where there has been an activity, but the focus really here is on large scale data. In addition, there are also map-based rendered WMSs, WMTSs, and when we look at what we want to do in an ArcGIS context, then it's already fairly easy to access WMS and WMTS data. So that's not something that we focused on. We focused on the data itself, make it easy to actually get the data for easy reuse in ArcGIS clients. So a quick slide on the ArcGIS platform slide, which, yeah, it doesn't look that different from many of the other Inspire or so slides. The key thing here are two things. It's both, it can be, you can have the server yourself, or you can use cloud-based solutions. And a key thing here is also the portal, which sits in between the different devices and clients and actually the data. And it provides a mechanism to access that information. So when we ask the question is, so what can we do with ELF data to fit into that picture well, so it's easy to actually access the data in the ArcGIS platform? I would say probably 10 years ago, the answer would have been simple, just create shapefiles, right? But, and you still get these kind of questions, of course, or the requests, but what we see here is it's no longer shapefiles. If you use your mobile phone, it talks to a server, it doesn't read the shapefile, it talks to a service on the web that actually gets the data. So not so different from WFS, but it's a slightly different type of service. So the shapefile is something that will help some people, but in terms of the whole evolution of the IT infrastructure and that we see in the web, we're really looking at a more web-oriented support for the ArcGIS platform. So if we see, so that's the standard thing. So we have the download services, which are actually direct access WFSs in that case. And we have for the view services, both WMSs and WMTSs. So that's the standard. And there has been a lot of work also in improving in the last years the access to these OGC services directly, and you can talk to them directly. But we actually went ahead and did two things. One is we actually we are harvesting the WFS data and putting it into ArcGIS Online. So we have a scalable solution that can support many concurrent users, more than an Inspire service necessarily has to support, and we have the data basically online. So we harvest the data from the WFSs and store it in ArcGIS Online. And the second thing then is also to make it available through the mechanism that all the clients in the ArcGIS platform and also all the APIs, JavaScript API and others support, which is the ArcGIS or GeoService REST API feature service. So that's basically what we do in the project, and that then enables users of ArcGIS software to use the data straight away without any problems, because it feels natural to them the way the data is structured. In order to do that, we also simplify structures that you find in the Inspire data. So we simplify that. I have a few examples. We also changed the layout structure to make it more map-friendly. We cache the data so that it's always available and with guaranteed performance. There are more than 100 services from the mapping agencies, and so also to decouple from availability issues, we do cache the data. And the idea, that we haven't done that yet, but for the future that's planned also to keep it synchronized with change-only updates. Why are we using ArcGIS Online and not just ArcGIS Server as an on-premise, like a hosted solution, as we've heard from Lars from Metria? One thing is, of course, for us, we're a small company, so the thing that we want to do is we want to benefit from the cloud benefits from the software as a service approach that ArcGIS Online uses, and also we don't have the resources to run the operations with all the support and keep the data online, etc. So we want to focus on the technical aspects of making the data available, not of running services ourselves. And I think it's what we see, that's actually from a recent report from PwC, I think, PwC, right? On the use of clouds, and there they focus on basically software as a service and also platform as a service. Clouds, not really the infrastructure where you just have it on Amazon, you install Linux and do everything yourself, just like you would do with a local server, but the software as a service. And what we see there is, I think there are two messages in that all these numbers. There is quite an increase on the business is shifting in that direction. So basically, there is already 10% of the sales from the companies is on the cloud, and 90% is on licensing software. That's still a majority, but the speed is quite rapid in which that is changing. The other thing as well is it actually lists Esri. It reflects Esri's focus on ArcGIS Online as a tool because it's considered the 22nd fastest growing cloud company in the world. So there is a lot of investment in that and a lot of work that's been done there. So let me just quickly go through. So there is a landing page where the information, elf.maps.arcgis.com. Most of the content is not, it's within the project only available. There is one data set, Euroglobal map, that because it's open data, and we've published it. Let me quickly, we also have the regional map, the boundary map, but then most of all, what we are working on is we have now more than 100 national services. If you see the number of countries and then the number of themes, they usually set up one service per theme. We actually have to harvest a lot of data. And in fact, like it was also mentioned, we are also hitting issues with that. So it's a process of getting really the data out of the services, validating the data, and being able to move it into ArcGIS. Then, as I mentioned earlier, probably most people are more familiar with opening a shapefile in ArcMap. So we also have some guidance on or explanations on how you actually do that with connecting to the data in ArcGIS Online, loading it, and then you can use it. You can use it as you would if you would connect to your local ArcSDE or to your shapefile. So that's administrative units in Belgium now in ArcMap. So we're working also on providing guidance material on really on how to use that. Maybe some examples of the changes that we did. For example, administrative unit is one feature type in Inspire. We're splitting it into different levels so that we can show different features depending on the scale of the map. So we split it into several feature types depending on the level that we have. We also, another example for simplifying data structures. So usually the things can have an arbitrary number of names with a lot of information about gender, etc. Actually, most of the, where we don't have the data, we have excluded that because then we would just be shipping empty fields. So basically, we just reduced it to 3 languages with names, and we just have the language and the name. So that's straightforward to use. We don't have any more data in our source data, but it's easy to manage and using ArcGIS. That's another example of actually merging, joining statistical data with the reference data. That's really what we expect that people will do when they use the data. A screenshot where you can see it on an iPhone as another device, or in ArcGIS Pro, the new 64-bit rich client. Let me conclude quickly. You've seen that slide, so I'm going back to the portal aspect now. So when the question is then how do people find it? How do people interact with that? How do people get to the slides and to the data sets? So what we do have is, of course, metadata. We don't really use ISO metadata. That's basically the standard metadata that ArcGIS offers, but we provide, it's very similar, access and use constraint descriptions, so there's a big overlap, and that's then used when people use Portal or any of the other mechanisms to actually search for the data. And how you do that then depends on the client that you're in. This is using the online map viewer. It looks a bit different when you're in ArcGIS Pro, etc. But basically, all that goes via the portal, where you can then find the data. One thing that we're also looking at is ArcGIS or Esri is working on a concept of a marketplace. It exists currently mostly for apps, but there is also for some things there is data. So you can get weather data or demographic data. So, and that could be another mechanism how you actually get to reference data for Europe. So that's a completely different approach to actually getting to the data using the standard mechanisms of the platform. That's something that we're also looking at as a potential mechanism to actually get access to the data. So the last slide that I have is what will happen after the project ends in a month. So there is still the access to the data is available and will continue to be available, and we'll also continue to do work on this. This doesn't stop with the end of the project. What actually happens is, because so far it's a project, but it will move to a transition phase where step by step this will move to Eurogeographics. They will the responsibility will be transferred to them. And actually, there will be one of the keynotes this week is from the Executive Director and Secretary General of Eurogeographics, Mick Corey, on Thursday morning, and he will be talking about the experience and the outlook. So you will get more information on how this, after the project finishes, how it will move forward to become an operational service on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you, Clemens. There is a little bit of time for questions. If you have any, maybe Lars and Lucian can come over and respond.
Just one quick one, and anybody can answer, even in the audience. I'm just curious how much uptake there is on the Atom download. Like Lars, maybe since you're working with multiple clients, how many people are interested in that versus the WFS? I'm just trying to get an idea of the popularity, let's say, with providers.
And I think Atom is very popular. They want to go with Atom first, WFS later. I think that's the general sense.
For us, it was the other way around, because when we implemented it, we only have WFS, and I think it's okay. There was only WFS available, and now we have ATOM also, but they are considering to be a bit harsh because they have to actually when they do an update on the database, we have to maintain all of the packages and make sure that those are synchronized. So they kind of say, no, I think it's okay how we already did it so far. At least this is our case.
You guys are too early.
Well, I think it's from the ELF experience is basically the focus there was also on the direct access so that you can do your own subsetting. I don't want the whole country. I want this part or only these feature types. But there are also these requests on, I want to just download the data, etc. So how can I do that? So that's definitely something that needs to be addressed or that needs an approach when we look at this transition phase, because there is certainly some demand for that, whatever the implementation is, whether it's Atom or a predefined query in a WFS.
That leads me to a question about how you see most users accessing help. Is it meant to be service-based, so transactional, or people want to just grab data sets? And so there's sort of a fundamental difference there in terms of the use cases of how you're working with the data, file-based versus service-based.
Well, in the ELF context, I think the idea is that it's mostly transaction-based, which, in my view, it has some limits because it's called an inspired download service for a reason, also from the design. But it's definitely, as you can see from this web-based approach, in the work that we did in ArcGIS, it's clearly service transactional interaction that we're looking at. That, of course, doesn't stop also the mechanism. There are several who just want to download the data and then use it in their ArcGIS clients using specific tools that they have. So I think it's a mix of both, really, that the market demands. Sure.
I guess, I guess it also depends on how often the data is updated and how current and how Lucia mentioned daily updates for some teams. I think, in my experience, I've seen many SDIs on the consumer side just to keep track of who has downloaded and who has the latest, which shouldn't happen, right? Just to keep track of, we already downloaded it and it was this day, and this is what I've seen happening, and that is not the way we would expect this to work. It's transactional so that you know which is the reliable endpoint that you're going to hit, and that's why the cloud is helping to make it sustainable, because more users, more servers, right? So that's the other aspects.
So data that gets updated more often, it's better in general. It helps transactional. It's better in data, but base map stuff, yeah, people might just want to download it. It's so big, it may not change much.
Basemap is really even more tricky because the basemap can be a PNG with a number of layers, and as S3 technology is concerned, basemap and other cached layers can be subset to enable offline mode. So if you are going in Census or an inspector and you're going in an area where you don't have access to the web, then you can leverage those. But again, the general assumption is everybody's working on the latest and the current version, and the transactional mode is the most effective way to do that. Yeah.
If you allow me, I guess it's just, Inspire says we should have available services, so we should use those, not download the data. But people are always, they are used to downloading the data. So for example, for a cadastral parcel, at the beginning they were tending to download the data or maybe getting access to it, but then they understood that it was changing daily, so they better use it from where it sits, because it's much more easily to use the latest data and not keeping track of when did I download it, is this analysis correct or not. We had some discussions on another project when one of the partners used one set of data which was a week old, and the other one used the data that was yesterday, and different results. Each partner had different results, so in the end we had two useless analyses.
You seem to link the reasons and the geodatabase templates with the ArcGIS reasons. Is there any connection? Because the geodatabase template, for instance, can I use it on ArcGIS 10.2 even if you will use a new geodatabase template, or is there any compatibility problem down the road?
Yeah, we try to align the two. You're right. I mean, every software release, there is a new enriched set of geodatabase templates. But when possible, we try also to keep.
To that, is there any incompatibility, for instance, with ArcGIS 10.2 or whatever? In terms of geodatabase templates?
If you use geodatabase template from 10.2 in 10.4, is that what you are?
Vice versa.
Yes, there are dependencies, so we keep track of those. Typically, the way we see is there is some latency in updating the template versus the software, so the database itself is touched less frequently. So we keep a couple of versions back. Those are supported, not the other way around. So if you have a template that is being, I don't know, the one that will come now, species distribution in 10.5, you cannot use in 10.2 because the software doesn't recognize this new team that we support now. Yeah. Yep, Robert?
How do you cope with the Inspire code list in your geodatabase structure?
We have, so Annex 2 and 3 is very different from Annex 1 in a way. And in the new teams that are Annex 2 and 3, what we do is those are translated in domains, so-called code list in the SAG database, if the vocabulary, if the list is well defined, or we keep it open, which it was a conversation topic with Clemens earlier. So, of course, that let the user decide what code list to reference, and that's great. It gives the maximum flexibility. So far, that has been the most desired, way of doing things. But for a cross-country data comparison, you would need some common code list. For now, we reference whatever the user let the configuration do.
So the direct use of the Inspire registry service or this?
It can be direct use. We definitely see users referencing directly the registry. Yes.
And the 10.5 Inspire extension will be when?
Towards the end of the year. Please. Oh, yes. Sorry.
So this is Ilkka from Spatina. I think you mentioned, several of the speakers mentioned the high availability and the performance requirements of services. For example, the direct access, it's very important, I think. What are the ways that the S3 platform you can use to actually ensure the continuous availability and the scalability testing, stuff like that?
I will focus on ArcGIS server, but there is an automatic kind of elastic aspect in ArcGIS Online. ArcGIS server since 10.1 has introduced the concept of site. The site is a logical server, conceptual server that includes multiple machines, and you configure only once. It means you can publish service, and those get deployed in every JS machine, regardless of how many you add or remove. So if you tomorrow expect a double number of users, you can just add one machine to the side, and it gets configured. You don't need to do anything. It gets configured with the service that already published, and it's load balanced. Then there is also web adapter that can help, or other tools that you have in your infrastructure. This is for high availability. And then, of course, there is a file server or a database. There are best practice for those as well. For performance, there are really a number of different tools that ArcGIS provides for increasing the number of instances that are created, how often, or what's the minimum number that you always keep it running so that it's ready for responding to a request. So those are all things that you can also constantly correct, make adjustment as you go, as you observe the log, the usage. There is a tremendous improvement from 10.3 because the traffic is monitored through graphic web charts. So you can actually see which service is requested at what time of the day, and so on. You can make your own decision on how to make it better. If you see timeout or if you see response time that are not the one that you are trying to address. I don't know if you want to add anything.
And there's also always the virtual infrastructure that you are running on. You can also rely on that. For example, VMware, you can use that for high availability, and make sure that the machines are configured so you can use different hosts if something happens with the host itself, because sometimes hosts do fail. But Roberto covered pretty good.
Any other question? Oh.
Maybe I don't need. Anyway, in the process you mentioned, there is no reference to the data validation. So you say that you pick the source and expose data compliant to Inspire. But how do you validate? Then you said that one of the current issues is that some pieces, some mandatory fields are missing. So how can you say that this is compliant to Inspire if you are missing mandatory elements in the schemas? So how do you validate the databases, the data models, and so on? And also, and then I won't speak anymore. And requirements that can't be encoded in XSD, so that can't be expressed by means of XML.
Whoa. Thank you. No, it's a very, I mean, we could even start from what compliance means, because.
At least compliance to a schema.
But yeah.
I'm providing data according to this schema.
Yeah.
So according to this structure, I have to be sure that all the elements foreseen by the structures are there. At least
Yeah.
this is the minimum.
So we do our best and we want to improve. The GDB template itself, the way it is today, it doesn't force you to make, it doesn't go to check. Let me give a very practical example. There could be a field that is voidable, right? You could say, I don't have it, but you need to give a reason, right?
Yes.
So,
But voidable, but if it's mandatory, you have to.
yeah.
I think it's a misunderstanding, because in the slide, I think in the slide from Estonia, it meant there are not mandatories in the metadata. In metadata editor, I think it's a misunderstanding. If you
I don't know. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Maybe that was one slide, but it's true what you're saying, though, that to validate if.
Validate, for example, WFS coming from
Yes.
ArcGIS for land cover, let's say.
Yes.
You get GML polygons, but the data specifications say you should have GML polygon patches.
Mm-hmm.
So it is not.
The schema validation, so there are steps that we do in the implementation, but from mandatory, voidable, or these mutually exclusive things, like if you do one, you shouldn't do the other, there is still work to do. There are definitely areas where the tool we use is, the design starts from, there are several steps. And for those who are curious, please stop by the stand. But we start from Enterprise Architect. There is an S3 model, and through it we go up to defining the layers for view and the feature type for download. But the challenge you indicated, which is how do I validate, you can use even an XML validator, okay? You can use an XML validator and it will tell you, you are missing, yes. you are missing. We rely on the official schemas, so you will detect that, and there will be a way to find out which element is missing in the geodatabase. But there are areas where there are even more than that from a compliance or implementation point of view when you switch to physical implementation like the style. In the UML, there is no mention of the style. And we found, for example, in land cover, that the style couldn't be built, right? So we had to change the model just to make it available with the right style later on. So content-wise, it was good, but not enough to make actually apply the style. So this is another example. So there are areas where we can definitely work further. Just to mention one other area where we want to improve is to help you often or sometime the bottleneck can be the database in terms of how many features is able to release or under a specific boundary box query or polygon query and so on. So we are also working to make it easier for the database administrator to grab the right queries and find out why and what are the areas for improvement. I don't know if you want to say anything about compliance more than in general.
Well, let me add just one thing. I think there is a fine line also between that you, or going back to look at OGC compliance, right? You have lots of compliant products, but it's easy to set up services that are not compliant, right? So there is this step there. Not everything that is actually in the data specs is checked by the data. It's not everything is in the geodatabase template. So there is a possibility that you can load data into it that when you then export that doesn't meet all the requirements. It's certainly possible. I think one of the things is, sometimes you also do that intentionally, right? Because you don't want to have constraints in the database because then loading is more complex, or less performance. That's also an issue, so there are trade-offs. The question is then what kind of tests to run, and that, of course, that's something that could be done in the geodatabase where you can have more tests, data reviewer, use ArcGIS data reviewer to use the geodatabase. More work could be done there. Or then, of course, using the validators. The other thing with data validators, there hasn't been that much available so far. But of course, I mean, as it was mentioned, there is ongoing work that will also be presented this week that I think will help there too and make it easier for everyone to test also the non-XML schema validation things.
Just a quick question. I was just curious if maybe for subsequent teams that have not yet been implemented, has there been any thought about making the data models XSD-based rather than?
No, not, well, we considered that. So the question was, just in case you haven't heard, we translate from the UML into a physical implementation, and we don't use the physical XSD schema. And the question was, have we considered to switch to that point? We have, but we still see the geodatabase template as the right way to go. If you made an effort and you may have spent, I don't know what's your average number of days for an ETL, and then the schema changes, you need to remake it. If only the encoding at the GML level changes, you don't need to do anything in the software with ArcGIS for Inspire. So we think, and the content which is at the UML level is what is in the implementing rules. It's not something that likely is going to change very frequently. What is instead in the technical guidance, and again, we have seen the V3 to V4 discussion and then transition with the corresponding decision to not be backward compatible. So that was a major transition for somebody who relies on XSD instead of a conceptual, more conceptual model. We are all around the week, including Sulev, who will join all of us tomorrow. So if you have questions, stop at the booth or enjoy the conference. Thank you for attending.